Welcome to the Ego versus EQ and You podcast, where we discuss the key aspects of emotional intelligence and ways to apply it in everyday living. Now let's work together to make common sense more common. This is the Ego versus EQ and You podcast. I'm Jen Shirkani. Thank you for joining today. In this episode, I want to talk a little bit about the comfort zone and the correlated result in more resilience when we reach out of our comfort zone. And in 2016, I actually started working on a book that explored the role of the comfort zone and how it related to emotional intelligence. And what I learned is the comfort zone is, in many cases, the enemy of emotional intelligence. And I'll explain a little bit about that in a minute. But I think despite our goal to be happy and satisfied, the comfort zone, or staying too comfortable, is the very thing that keeps us from the greatest happiness and satisfaction, ironically. My book ended up coming out in 2017. It's called Choose Resilience. And we've spent a lot of time on my first book, Ego versus EQ. But today I want to talk a little bit about this second book, Choose Resilience. And, just to start with my own little personal story here, I really was tested in my resilience without warning. It came on many years ago now. And until that point, I was so lucky or blessed because I hadn't really experienced a lot of hardship or struggle. It wasn't that I didn't have setbacks and challenges, going to college and getting married and all that. But what really challenged me was I was living in Orange County, California, in a cute little house, and my oldest daughter, Caitlin, was 2. I was pregnant with my second daughter, Annie, and my husband at the time was in the high-tech consulting industry. And he was laid off one September day in the middle of the whole .com crash. And for those that weren't around in those days, it was a pretty big industry-wide mass layoff that happened. And a lot of people that were in tech were affected by it, us included. And he was laid off on a Thursday. The following Monday was my 20-week ultrasound with Annie. And we were told that Annie had a serious birth defect affecting one of her kidneys. The very next morning was 9/11, September 11th, 2001. And of course, that threw everything, our whole country, into way out of the comfort zone, right? So I'm dealing with my own personal situation with my husband and my daughter, and then my business calendar cancels out for the foreseeable future because nobody wanted to travel, nobody wanted to get together in groups. I mean, it was just like everything stopped. And of course, I billed for time worked. So it meant my income was gone now too, on top of my husband being laid off. And I got to tell you, it was probably one of the hardest years I've had. I struggled with anxiety and fear and anger and depression. And I realized that year, because I had focused on emotional intelligence at work, I had never really thought about it at home. But I started to realize I could leverage this emotional intelligence competency to help me at home. So logically, you could say, well, reinvent yourself or go get a job. And I actually did. I went back to Nordstrom where I had spent my college years just to help pay the mortgage for a few months. But when I was able to kind of get out of my comfort zone and focus more on EQ. And if you heard episode 17 where I talk about the victim virus, I was absolutely there. I was feeling very victimized about my situation and my circumstances and how all of this could be happening to me, especially at once. And what I had to do was really remember I have control over certain elements of my life. And what I identified in the book were 3 key skills that are in the emotional intelligence competency that you can really focus on in times of challenge. And that is what I call the MOST model, because it stands for motivation, optimism, and stress tolerance. 3 things are critical. Now, if we look at motivation, some areas you can do or some things you can do to help maximize this skill is 1, identify activities that bring you the most satisfaction. What I find interesting, because I've been in this business 30 plus years, studying human behavior and focusing on development and professional growth, and motivations change over time. What motivated us in our 20s is different than what motivates us in our 30s, 40s, 50s. So you might need to do a quick motivation inventory. If the things that once were satisfying and fulfilling aren't anymore, it could be you need to rethink what does motivate me today. Maybe think about a goal that you want to set for yourself and what would be the benefit of it, or what is a reward you could give yourself in order to accomplish it. And the other thing I love to do that kind of counterdicts the complacency that sometimes falls upon us is set up like a 5-minute rule. Maybe I'm coaching somebody right now and she really wants to make a career change, but she's struggling with how to do that. And it feels insurmountable after all the years she's been at one company. And I said, you know what? Set aside a time once a week that's your time for you and your career. Just put it on the calendar, and it's your time to work on your resume or update your LinkedIn profile or reach out and network with people. But I find that if you have like even a 5-minute rule or a 10-minute rule, and you say, I'm going to do this just for 5 minutes. That's it, 5 minutes. I can handle that, right? What often happens is you start doing it for more. You may not stop at the 5 minutes if it's going well. And if it isn't going well, you stop at the 5 minutes. But at least you've taken some steps toward progress or change. Now, optimism is sort of this mindset of the future will be better than the past. And there's a great book, if you're interested, by Martin Seligman called Learned Optimism. Because a lot of people believe, oh, I'm born an optimist or I'm born a pessimist, but actually that's not the case. We can all learn to be optimists. And so one thing to think about is be mindful when your first reaction to a challenge is to assume the worst. What about this situation could work out well? One other technique that I've used to be more optimistic that has been really helpful, a lot of people make like a pro-con list if you're facing a question or a decision. And instead, maybe try making a pro-pro list. So what are all the upsides of this choice versus this choice? And now I'm not worrying about the negative side. I'm just looking at which one has a higher potential upside. Also, watch yourself using negative language. Fat chance, I never have any luck, nothing's ever going to change. Those are all symptoms of low optimism. And sometimes we don't even know we're saying it. It's just a habit that we have. So try and catch yourself through self-awareness. And sometimes you just have to remind yourself that success is possible even against really strong headwinds. Now, stress tolerance, we've all heard of managing your stress, right? Doing all the things we need to do to manage our stress. But when our reserves are low, we are much more easily triggered. So using your EQ, your self-awareness to monitor, how is my stress? What are some symptoms that my stress is getting into the red zone here? So I need to do something to help myself. And I think sometimes we have a lot of self-imposed pressure. So we need to allow room in ourselves for failure. I'm not going to be at my best. In those days with Annie, I was like, I just have to get through today. I just have to get myself through the day, make sure the kids aren't dead, make sure I'm not divorced, get through the day. And sometimes that's what we need to do, is just set our expectation to get through the day. And then, be mindful, be present. Try not to let all these other things distract us from what's happening right in front of us so that we can be clear-minded when we make decisions and we don't jump into a spiral of bad decision after bad decision after bad decision because stress is just the theme in our lives. Now, since then, I'm happy to report Annie had surgery and she is great today. And sadly, I've since then had to overcome a lot of business setbacks after 30 years in business. The economy has affected the company. Employees have affected the company. So we've had financial hardships. I got divorced. And there's plenty of times that I've said to myself, this wasn't my plan, right? This wasn't the life I thought I was going to have. My comfort zone not only kicked me out, it locked the door behind me. But what I have learned over time is I recover quicker. It doesn't mean I don't feel the setback. It doesn't mean I don't feel the stress or the negativity that comes with those setbacks. But I'm able to overcome them quicker by using the MOST model, by focusing on emotional intelligence instead of ego. So in a nutshell, whenever we find ourselves drifting back to that comfort zone or staying there out of fear or avoidance, we have to actively or proactively push ourselves to get out of that comfort zone. And you don't want to leave your comfort zone all at once. So I'm not saying, reinvent everything you do and always be uncomfortable, because that's not realistic either. But I think if you can make some small adaptations out of comfort zone, what happens is it rewires your intuitive and automatic responses to things. And so what was uncomfortable at one point starts to become comfortable. So we expand that comfort zone. We are able to spread that out wider. And as that grows, gradually you're willing to take on more risk and try new things and hopefully pursue new goals. And this is what helps you really build a life rich with fulfillment and gives you more self-confidence and ultimately happiness. So resilience is the goal here. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode. This wraps up our topic on the comfort zone. And if you have any scenarios or situations that you're in with someone you'd like some free advice on, we'll keep you anonymous. Feel free to drop us a note, podcasts@jenshirkani.com, and I'll have the email in the show notes as well. And thank you for listening. Thanks for joining us today on the Ego versus EQ and You podcast. If you liked this episode, be sure to follow us or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and please share our show with others. For questions or future topic suggestions, please email us at podcast@jenshirkani.com. Until next time, keep using your EQ and show ego who's boss.